Hi there again, Matt Gemmell here. Just a super quick video on the occasion of the very exciting launch of the larger Supernote, the new version of the A5 series, the A5X2 Manta. First, let me apologise for the quality of my voice at the moment. I've recently started a course of orthodontic treatment with those clip-in aligners, so my diction will be a bit clumsy. My S's will be a bit more sibilant. I apologise. I beg your indulgence. Right, so the Supernote Manta came out yesterday as I record this. 10.7 inch screen compared to the Nomad's 7.8 inch. It's a Carta 1300 and it's a Mobius display as well. The Carta 1300 part means slightly quicker response time in terms of display updates, and the contrast will be a bit better, slightly whiter background, darker ink. And the Mobius part means that the screen surface is plastic and thus flexible and thus potentially a bit more durable. So those are all good things. It's a repairable and upgradable device, just like the Nomad. I've got the crystal edition of the Nomad so you can see right into the back of it. This is the motherboard part, this is the battery. The motherboard is identical on the Manta. It's this exact one, same processor, same number of cores, same specs. Presumably swappable between the two even. The battery for the larger screened Manta does have a greater capacity. It's got the micro SD slot as well. So like this, you will be able to replace the motherboard should you need to, replace the battery later if you need to. It seems a lot of people don't realise that the fact that these components are removable makes the screen a replaceable component as well. You know, you could, if your battery and your motherboard are absolutely fine and you damaged the screen, presumably slightly more likely statistically, you could take those out, get a new screen component when Rata makes those available, and put them in. And that's true for the, as I say, for the Manta as well. So reduced waste, longer device lifespan, and presumably not having to send things off for service because you can do it yourself. You even get the necessary screwdriver with these devices. So fantastic. The question that everyone is dealing with at the moment, of course, is which one do you buy? There's a natural tendency to buy the newest thing and to buy the biggest thing, I think, and owning both sizes of e-ink devices myself, my feeling is that you need to make this decision quite carefully. I think there's a tendency to always go for the bigger thing in case of missing out in future, or in case of facing suboptimalities or difficulties because of a lack of space, and we don't tend to take the time to consider where suboptimalities creep in because of having more space than you need. So the thing to do is think carefully about what you're doing, either with an existing e-ink device if you have it, or with paper if you're using paper, or indeed whatever you're doing on your computer that you don't feel is optimal enough so you are interested in getting an e-ink device. You're always going to have an existing context, and you're probably going to have some planned things that you're wanting to do with this prospective device you're purchasing as well. I would make an actual list of those and prepare pros and cons on each side, smaller device versus larger device, for each thing you're actually going to be doing. Now, my pattern of use is such that, and this is something I really discovered when I got the Nomad and started using it. I use this 10 or 20 times a day, at least 7 days. It's become indispensable and I love it so much. And what I discovered is that the things I largely do on the personal side, writing my morning pages, gratitude journal, writing letters to my son, logging things to do with health and exercise and all that stuff. And on the work side, outlining, planning in the form of character sheets and location sheets, because I write novels. All of them were, and I didn't expect this, they were inherently sort of repaginatable, you know? They could readily flow to as many pages as necessary. And indeed, the feature I probably use most often on the Supernote, aside from headings and interlinking, is just the ability to insert pages between existing pages because I want to continue something. Putting additional material right behind something that's already there within a larger structure turns out to be the most important thing for me. Outlines don't all need to be on a single page. A letter doesn't need to all be on a single page. There's no particular advantage to that. But there will be some situations where you will want to have a larger screen with the attendant benefits and compromises that come with it. I think that if you are someone who is annotating a lot of like complex PDFs where you need to see an entire page at once, with the smaller device you can rotate it, of course, and get the same width of the display on the larger device, albeit the smaller is in landscape and the larger is in portrait. Though of course you have only half as much length in that scenario. So you can view PDFs bigger by rotating the smaller device, but if you need to see an entire page at one time, obviously that's a definitive use case. If you're working in certain kinds of technical documents, if you are writing or annotating or performing from sheet music, definitely want a larger display for that, because you don't want to be changing page twice as often. You've got enough to do. And certainly if you're doing certain kinds of diagramming work which benefit directly from a simultaneously viewable expanse, like I would think mind mapping, and I mean there are hundreds and hundreds of specific sort of technical scenarios where you might want to have more context. The simultaneously visible context is the key. Then you will definitely want to have the larger display on the Manta device with the corresponding compromises. Well, what are the compromises? It would just be increased cost and nominally reduced portability. I mean, it's extremely light and it's durable and all that, but just physically it takes up a bit more space on the desk. Whereas if you're doing things, making, you know, bullet lists, outlines, writing letters, planning things out that are more about gathering all the ideas rather than getting a simultaneous overview and restructuring them. And I think that's probably the biggest category of use, certainly turned out to be for me. Then, excuse me, you may wish to make the sacrifice of a smaller screen whilst having the advantages of increased portability, and there's perhaps a more personal feel and so on. It really is so particular to yourself, and the thing is to be particular about it, to be intentional. These devices, these Supernotes are, I mean, intentionality is at the very core of them. It's at the core of the interface, where you're always in a document or one of the sort of ancillary apps. You are thinking and you're putting ideas together and you're interlinking ideas and you are focused. It is so intentional. If there's any adjective that could be applied to these devices, I think that's it. And it's important to do what I don't think we tend to do instinctively, and extend that intentionality back to the decision about which size of device to use in a given context. I semi-regularly need to block out a scene in terms of the physical positions and movements of characters through the narrative, because it helps me to have a firm picture of it myself. And the firmer picture you have yourself as a writer, the better you will convey that picture to the reader. I firmly believe that's the case. I also will sometimes have a need for drawing larger scale diagrams of things for marketing purposes, and maybe I'm mocking up a campaign or something on the web or whatever it is. Maybe I'm just actually brainstorming with a mind map. I also do a lot of woodworking, so it can be useful to draw quite detailed diagrams of things, and whilst most of them are absolutely fine on a 7.8 inch screen, there are occasions where I would definitely jump to a larger one for sort of plan diagrams or for something intricate where I want lots of different elevations and perspectives. So there is an absolute need for each size. And I think that most people will fall slightly more on one side than the other. And if you're getting just a single size of device, as I think a great many people will, or certainly until you really sort of find yourself hugely benefiting from and committing to the workflow, then you should make that decision based on what you are actually doing and what you will actually be doing, and not think of it as a sort of fictional best of all worlds device, because there is a fundamental, inescapable physical tension between things like portability and a certain degree of emotional colouring to a smaller device that is within the hand, and or rather versus the utility of having a great deal of screen space where you can simultaneously view everything at once. Barring any science fiction technology of screens that can change size upon request, you're always going to need to balance that. And the way to do it is to think about it up front and determine where the majority of your own actual use cases lie. Put aside the perfectly natural, emotional and kid at Christmas voice that perches on the shoulder, mine as well, that says got to have the newest thing and probably got to have the biggest thing, and how do I offset potential future, not inadequacy, but suboptimality. And I think in the technology industry in general, we're very much prejudiced towards the bigger numbers, be they processor speeds or screen refresh rates or amounts of storage, or of course screen dimensions. And there's something that's very, not just unintentional in the sense of not being deliberate and thought through based on need, but there's also something that's kind of fearful about that. It's better to make decisions based on satisfying something you do need, rather than based on a rather more nebulous and ill-considered fear of something down the road. This is a decision that you absolutely can make in an intelligent and informed way if you just take a little time beforehand to think about where the majority of your use is. I absolutely have a regular and quite definitive need for a larger screened device, which the Manta is. I would, however, have to say that the majority of my usage in terms of occasions where I use a device can readily also be done on a small screen device, and it carries some of its own advantages. If you're not in my position, where you're sort of mostly on one side but straddling the two worlds, if you fall squarely into one or the other, then the decision becomes easy. But I think the majority of people are in this sort of slightly grey zone between the two. But I think if you sit down and analyse what you do and what you want to do and what is truly important to you, it will become pretty clear. And indeed, with, as I keep saying, with the Supernote platform in general, with these devices, there's always another option, because we have this feasibility for, in the future, being able to just get, say, the screen component and maybe the larger battery component, swap it in, upgrades, there's replaceability. In a way, it's it's sort of more of a commitment, because it's more of a commitment but less of a wild card and a concern, because these things are designed uniquely. I think I can't think of a single other device in not just the e-ink space but tablets as well, designed to actually be companions for years and years and years down the road, because they don't rev these devices every year, by no means. And they do not want to sell you a whole new device just because you've used the battery so much that it's, you know, it's had so many charge cycles that it no longer takes a full charge or whatever. Not that battery life is an issue. So, I mean, this is something that whichever choice you make is going to be with you for a long time. And that's something to be hugely grateful for. And since it is going to be with you for a long time and become this right-hand man that it is, certainly already is for me, it's worth spending the time to make that initial decision properly. So there you go. Hugely excited for everyone that has a Manta no doubt coming in the next few weeks, or indeed a Nomad. And I will definitely have more videos on these devices and how I use them in the future. Thanks for taking the time to watch this one. I hope you'll like and subscribe and tune in again in future. And I hope you have a great holiday period as well. Take care.